What's up? It's your boy Sly Cooper. We're here today with our first Foundation podcast. I have with me today Goodies. Say hello.
Hey, how's it going?
And I have the King over here, False King.
You sounded way too nervous when we started this, and that went way too smooth.
All right. Intros aside, we are part of the Foundation. Goodies and I being on the O3 Council at the moment, and False King being the owner. And we're here today to discuss. I think it was some sort of cybersecurity kind of stuff. I know Goodies had he had mentioned a story that really got us into this topic, so it would be interesting. I don't know if should we talk about the story real quick that got us kind of thinking about stuff, or should we maybe have Goodies tell the story again? I don't know. Kind of lost that moment.
Yeah,
Sure,
for
sure.
sure.
Was it the Target one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, privacy. It was more about privacy, like privacy laws and
Right,
shit like
right.
that. Yeah.
Mhm.
So at least we now show that this wasn't studied in like properly. Like this is actual like a natural flowing conversation.
Yeah. I'll do a couple
Yeah, so
edits.
just to
No.
for sure. Just to recap the story, there was a young lady about 16 years old who was shopping at Target, and her living at home, and her dad started seeing the mail coming in from Target that was advertising things like diapers and uh, what baby formula and sort of these products, and he was very livid, and he went into the store to scream at the manager, basically telling him, you should not be advertising essentially sex to my daughter, you should be encouraging her to have sex, or if she's way too young. And then sure enough, a couple weeks later, he had come back and made an apology, saying turns out she's pregnant. They had tracked her buying patterns in products that she was purchasing, and was doing just some basic correlation to what other people purchase, and pregnant people purchase those items. So they had sort of accidentally found out that she was pregnant before her own parents even knew, um, which yeah lends into the privacy and really the metadata about ourselves that's being tracked and correlated, really just to mostly for advertising, but I'm sure other nefarious purposes.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm not. I'm kind of surprised knowing parents that they didn't blame Target for getting her pregnant.
Right.
But yeah, like there was like I don't know if you guys ever saw the documentary on the Trump election when it came to this kind of topic too, with Facebook and analytics and stuff. They actually
Mm.
they had hired like a certain group of people to get a large amount of data on search patterns and things like that, and they were really able to pinpoint and shove certain rhetorics down people's throats in Facebook and stuff to really help out the election process in their favor. It was pretty interesting. I forget what it's called, but yeah, this kind of stuff's a little scary, honestly. Like I don't know, I don't want to sound like a super freaked out kind of guy when it comes to technology and stuff, but I'm very uncomfortable with the idea of companies being able to track all of your data in this kind of way and really do what they want with it, you know?
But
Mm-hmm.
I also think that it's like it's due to the consumers. I mean, we want some kind of, at least most of us want some kind of easiness when we order something. Like we actually want to see products that we want to order, want to get, and as a collective, we just care less and less about privacy. And like I can say that I care a lot about privacy, but I have like 3 Google Homes in my home, and I like the easiness too. Like I gladly sacrifice, it might be a bit of my privacy for that easy going. And I swear to companies that they will do it safely and fine, even though you somewhere know that's not true. Like you know they're going to abuse it, but still you're telling to yourself like, they might not.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of reminds me of the meme, like 1980. Watch out, the government might be wiretapping the phone in modern times. Hey, wiretap, play me.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
had this. Hmm?
oh no, sorry, let's go.
Well, I had this idea, and I think I'm an idiot, so I'm probably wrong about this, but I feel like there's some sketchiness when it comes to like I mentioned before, um, with the ability to collect data and stuff, and especially things like 23andMe and certain when it comes to like DNA testing and stuff, they can really find a lot of information about people as far as like what kind of health risks they might have in the future. And would it be scary if those companies were able to sell that information to like say um, uh, insurance companies, you know, like for health insurance and stuff like that, and what could
So,
be the danger of that?
at least in America, there was an act passed called GINA, GINA, and it's the Genetic Information Non-Discriminatory Act, and essentially it prevents just that based on genetic information, that insurance companies can't hike up prices and things of that nature, just based on genetic information that's been acquired. But that says nothing about advertisers, and who knows the research. I imagine a decade or so from now that people are currently, everyone and their mother is sending in their saliva samples or whatever, and so now they're getting this sort of unprecedented amount of diverse human genetics just voluntarily. And what type of data correlation are they going to be able to do to determine maladies or any type of whatever it may be, diagnoses in the future, and will they be able to use that for advertising purposes? More than likely.
I actually find this a very interesting topic, because I saw a documentary about it a while ago, and my first reaction, if I hadn't seen the documentary yet, would be like, it's your choice to submit that data. Like if you willingly give your DNA, you know the terms of service. Like if you don't read that when giving of your DNA, it's on you. That would be my first response. But what I forgot to calculate in that is that when you give your DNA, you also give the DNA from a big part of your family.
Yeah.
So you might involuntarily give away your DNA, that's also the DNA of other people in your family who had no say in it. And that really makes it like, is it your choice because it's your DNA, or isn't it your choice because it's also part of a bigger, it's also the really personal data, well, data between air quotes, of someone else?
Yeah, and I mean, like, it seems like a gray area that's very difficult to legislate. And what scares me the most is like, could companies health insurance companies hike prices up on people? Because if like you're a smoker, right, you would check mark the smoking section, and they're gonna charge you more on your premium or whatever, because you're a smoker. You have certain health risks associated with that. Well, if they're purchasing DNA information from other people, they could know whether or not I have a predisposition for a lot of stuff, that puts me at a certain percentile. Those kind of DNA websites will show you what kind of genes or whatever you have that leave you predisposed to certain conditions. They could easily like start hiking up prices on you in ways that we wouldn't have normally expected them to. You know what I mean? Like it becomes to a level of like breach of privacy in my mind, where it's like they could theoretically know a lot about you that you don't even know about yourself. It's like this is some body privacy stuff going on here. It's pretty freaky to me.
But I think that we can actually, you can solve that part with legislation. Like, in my mind, when you actually need to buy it, there's already something wrong. Like, if you need to buy such data about a person, you're not going to do that for any good reasons. You're only going to do that to make profits of it.
But
So,
will they
first of
legislate
all,
that? Like, will people even care enough? Like, what happened with the whole Snowden thing? Like, Snowden came out with a bunch of stuff about how the NSA was secretly listening to all the shit we had to say, and how popular was that information? What, it was like a big crazy thing for like a couple weeks, and then people went on to memes, and that was it. Like, you know what I mean? Now Snowden's like hiding out in other countries and shit, and people say free him, but most people don't even give a fuck like nobody's fighting to stop the NSA from like watching us anymore. Nobody does. You don't hear about it in the news or anything. It's still a thing today. Like it never changed. Like
I wouldn't even be surprised if they're like still using Prism. Like the whole thing that got into controversy, and they're still using it. Like, yeah, just wait a few weeks, it will die out again, and we can still keep on using it.
Yeah, like we don't know what's going on in those kinds of. Most people don't care enough. So like, I'm not very confident in the human population to get laws put into place to stop like health insurance companies from being able to utilize this information in really negative ways. It'd really be dangerous for the poor. especially who can't already afford health insurance in America. Like in Europe, it's a little different. You guys have a lot more universal healthcare and stuff, I believe. But in America,
Yeah, but I
ugh,
don't really think that it has to do with universal healthcare in this case. I mean, this is one of those things that is really depending on how you implement it. Because you can also look at it this way, like if you, for example, enforce that once they get the data and they see that you have a predisposition for any disease, that they are required to report it to you, and not to any healthcare service or something, but like, hey, we've noticed this, get this maybe you need to get this checked out because you have a predisposition for this disease. That might be actually beneficial for both poor people, healthy people, non-healthy people, for everyone, because you can preemptively
yeah.
get certain things checked. But it really depends on how you're going to use the data, what legislation you're putting in place, and how we're going to handle it.
I don't have. So I think that both can happen. Like for one, the thing you're talking about does happen already, at least. Like when you do something like submit your data to 23andMe, and they will give you all these predisposition and all this that information. Um, but I don't have a lot of faith in companies and to not eventually realize that like insurance companies could make a lot of money if they bought
Mm.
that information. You know what I mean? They can make a huge amount of money. They could avoid certain health policies with certain people where they otherwise wouldn't have. If that ever becomes a thing, it's really scary to me. Um, and you'd have to have faith that we'd eventually legislate out of that or find a workaround for it. I don't know. I'm kind of pessimistic when it comes to this. I don't think most people read the terms of
Yeah.
service. Like
Oh, absolutely not.
I mean,
Yeah, and I might have misspoke. I don't know that the GINA prevents insurance companies from raising prices, but I do know that you can't essentially deny someone coverage based on their genetic information. Same goes for employment. So if
that's good at
uh,
least. Yeah, that was useful
yeah,
information to know. I didn't know that before. At least they can't deny you, but that's different than saying they can't charge you extra.
yeah,
Like
yeah, and I don't know enough about that, but I think at least from a cybersecurity perspective, is that this data is not just to the entrusted to the companies is not impenetrable, or it's not uh, impossible to get that information leaked and gotten into the wrong hands. It happens all the time. And so a lot of these data privacy laws, and in Europe you have the GDPR, and there's all different kinds of ones in America that protect different aspects of data, whether it's financial information or personal information or health information and all this. Um, there's typically just a fine that's associated with a breach in this type of mishandling of information, whether you're found to not be protecting it in proper ways or it gets leaked. It's basically just a fine, and huge corporations, Google, Facebook, all those guys have been sued under these laws many times to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions at this point. And it's essentially a drop in the bucket for them.
yeah.
Um, so it really depends on how how can we actually enforce this to a point where it's not just like a slap on the wrist for a massive corporation who harbors untold amounts of data on each individual.
Yeah, and untold
Um,
amounts of wealth. Like
yeah.
that's really hard to
Yeah,
not.
Right,
Like,
right.
what are you gonna do to not slap them on the wrist? You'd have to like put them in prison or something. You know what I mean? Like, 'cause suing is
Mhm.
just not a big deal to a lot of these companies. And you gotta remember too, guys. Like, this isn't just DNA specifically. This is also purchasing patterns. For instance, insurance companies might be interested in the fact that you're buying a lot of your diet. Like if you're shopping online
Mhm.
is way huge, like way bigger now. If you're buying a lot of things that have known carcinogens or like very unhealthy dietary habits, they know about that. That's information they could use as well to maybe charge you more for health insurance and things like that. Is like the combination of knowing somebody's DNA and also knowing their purchasing patterns is like huge to me. It's crazy.
but if ever insurance companies are going to get data of you outside of what you have approved, then there's something completely wrong. I mean, that would be a point of no return, in my opinion. If actual healthcare providers, like, they have to make sure that you can get your health, are going to buy your data to check what you're doing, buying, whatever, then there is something massively broke.
Well,
We
yes.
should not even ever get to that point. Like that would be dystopic
Oh,
to the
we
max.
totally could get to that point, in my opinion, especially because when you say something like data that you haven't approved, a lot of these choices, as far as like approval, are much more of like Hobson's choices than they are just regular choices. I don't know. Hobson's choice is basically a take it or leave it kind of choice, right? Like when it comes to like, for instance, California right now in the U.S. is the only state that I know of where you can actually like recommend or whatever, you could opt out of them gathering data, right? But for a lot of companies and a lot of other places, like Google, like what are you going to stop using Google? You're going to stop buying from Amazon. You're going to stop all of these things that are like hugely accessible. Sure, I guess you can go walk to the store and stuff, but it's very, very, very difficult nowadays to live a regular life while avoiding companies taking analytic information from you. Like they're going, you're going to
Right,
get that
right.
to happen, and there's no way to
Yeah,
Yeah,
opt
but
out of that.
I know.
well, you can. I mean, you can use Google without being tracked. You can use YouTube. You can use any service that you actually require to live normally. I mean, the only thing you might not can do is like go on social media, but
Maybe
that's
purchase a
not a
VPN.
requirement.
You'd have to purchase a VPN, I suppose, right? Like, would that be the major
Well,
way
I
of?
mean, well, they can maybe get your IP address or something, yeah, but I mean, even for that, there are solutions. I mean, you can use Tor browser. I mean, Opera has a free built-in VPN and stuff like that. So there is solutions. So it's a choice we're making as a
Uh,
collective, as people, to not care about it.
Philosophically, this gets very difficult because to say you can means multiple things, right? Like saying that. How do I put this? Um, we have to basically write off a certain percentage of our population who are more on the side of unable to. So, like for instance, the older generations, people that aren't very tech savvy, um, who are going to need healthcare more than anybody. Uh, People that are much more not they don't have necessarily great capacities for gathering information, getting the right kind of information to even know this kind of stuff and know that they should be protecting their information online. Um, and especially when companies already are gathering your information so that they can shove certain information down your throat and avoid other information. I mean, it gets to a certain point where it's like, how many people really can protect themselves online? Like I
Well,
don't think it's a super large percentage.
it's that last part is a generational issue. I mean, to say it very harshly, that's an issue that's going to solve itself within the next coming decades. Uh, the
Perhaps.
generation that doesn't know that or has no clue about it or is properly not that able to learn about it is going to die out, to say it harshly. Um, it's up to us, the younger generations, to actually take up the interest. But people just don't care, and that's the whole thing. They don't care. But if you do care, you aren't limited. You can still use anything you want. You can still have email. I mean, you can go for Proton Mail as long as you're not properly doing anything really illegal or something. There is a lot of things to actually protect your privacy, but if you don't care about it, you should not have to care about privacy.
But here comes to the point where we're going to damn a certain percent of the population to what I think would be a cruel and unusual punishment based on their abilities, which is out of their control. What I mean by that is there are like there's a certain percentage of the population that's not they can't connect the long-term consequences of these kinds of things and take them at value. You know what I mean? So like there's going to be a lot of people out there that don't protect themselves online even if they have the information available just because they don't understand the ramifications long term. And are we willing to allow
Right.
those people to have that cruel and unusual punishment of dealing with these health insurance issues in the future and other problems just because they're, for lack of a better term, on the dumber side? Like I don't know if that's necessarily fair.
Well, then in that case we're still living in a democracy. So probably if they're going to do things like that, people are still, if they're going to get hurt, they'll price. You know, they'll voice their opinions, and nobody's probably going to get behind companies for their own profits to buy data. I mean, the leftists are not going to agree with that. The rightists are not going to agree with that. Nobody's going to agree with. All right, we're going to make rich companies more richer by buying our private data. So there can eventually become legislation about it if people care, and if the majority doesn't care, then what is for them the actual issue? I mean, if they don't care about their prices being raised, even if it happens, yeah, as long as it
Yeah,
doesn't negatively impact the people who do care about it.
that's the thing. There's really no way to enforce any kind of unilateral legislation, at least not right now. Every country, or there are different ones that affect multiple countries. Uh, there's one that governs the majority of Asia. There's the GDPR, which is the entire European Union. There are two states actually. Well, there honestly might be more that have stringent privacy laws, but California has had one for quite a while. But this year, Virginia came
Oh
out with
yeah,
one. So Virginia
I saw
has
that.
the Virginia Consumer Online Privacy Protection Act.
Okay.
So that, but even still, 48 to go, or whatever. I don't know that there aren't any others that exist. I assume that there are. Maybe they're just not quite as stringent. But yeah, the Virginia one I've heard is very stringent. But yeah, even multinational corporations like Google are going to have data that affects very, their laws are applied very differently, whether the server is in Europe versus whether the server is in California.
Yeah.
And a lot of it will, apply to, like the California one applies to all California residents, even if you're outside the state at the time. It still applies if you're a California resident. So there's, it has to, a lot of changes were put in place just simply for that. But who's to say that, things are being enforced 100% properly? What are the chances of that? I think very small. At least with the GDPR, you have one of the central things to it. I mean, most central is consent, but of course, clicking I agree on the terms of service is enough consent. But you also have the right to be forgotten, which I don't know is a right that is in the majority of the U.S. at the time. But you can opt out and say, I want you to delete any information you have on me now, and they more or less have to comply. Now, whether that data gets leaked beforehand, if it gets compromised and other people are still able to acquire it, again, fines get involved. But at least that is, there is legislation to that extent.
Well, also,
But
oh, sorry.
yeah, no, that was pretty much it.
I'm interested in that because I'm wondering, could a company, for instance, gather data, um, send that data through another company that it also owns, but it's a separate company, a separate entity entirely. And then if you decide to opt out and want them to delete your data, they legally are obliged to, but only for that company. Well, they can still hold that data on a separate company without deleting
Well,
it.
I can answer this from my experience with these of the GDPR. Like when the GDPR was introduced here, like I worked for quite a big company at the time, and they were taking it very seriously. As in, like, I was one of the persons who had to work on the systems to get all those laws compliant things working, like making those systems to delete, like the right to be forgotten, having those systems in place so we can actually delete all the data, and it was actually thoroughly deleted. So there was a lot of stress on, hey guys, we have to comply with this because this is serious. Being taken serious by the government. So from my perspective, if a government is serious about it and they're showing like, hey, we put heavy fines on it, you fuck this up, we're coming for you, then it works
Mm-hmm.
properly.
Okay.
And
Yeah, and
companies do actually delete it. Like, I mean, I think even a Google isn't to risk uh, with any weird structure, um, with such big laws that could really fuck them up.
Hmm.
Why would you risk it as a company?
Fair.
yeah, and that's sort of a big aspect is you can't necessarily transfer ownership of data. The person who the data is about is ultimately the data owner, and then you have data custodians, which are the people that sort of carry the data, and can use it for whatever purposes they deem fit. But the data owner is still the person who has it. It's a lot like um, risk for, think about car insurance or any really type of insurance, you can mitigate the risk by sort of purchasing insurance or some kind of procedure or policy to lower your risk, but you can't really completely eliminate it, and you can't transfer it to another person and just say, if I get in an accident, I have no fault, I have no there's I have nothing to do with it.
Okay.
It's a lot like that.
Oh, that's interesting.
If anything, this does prove that, like, I know that you're a little bit cynical about it, that legislation and properly working on it does actually work. So democracy in this part and the legislation does work, because, for example, those two states, they are for it. It was implemented. It's going slowly, and it should be going much faster. But there are people who do care and who are working on getting it changed. So it gives a positive outlook.
Yeah, I have a problem with being slightly pessimistic when it comes to certain things, especially things like this, mostly because I have taken a lot of value, and I don't mean to say this in like a big-headed way. I really hate to be big-headed about this, but I recognize that there is a good percentage of the population that are much more, not even dumb, but just simple-minded. They're not interested in this kind of conversation. They're not interested in learning about the risks of companies being able to take information from you. They just see it as like, oh, cool, I get advertisements that are in my favor, and that's fine, whatever. They want to live their lives. They want to eat food. They want to go shit, laugh, and sleep. And that's really it. And those people I have kind of like a care for. Like I want to make sure that they're not getting fucked over at the end of the day, because in truth I could probably end up protecting myself just fine, but they might not be able to.
That might be a bit misplaced, because they might actually really don't care and are happy like they are. So
no, but they will care about the consequences. They just don't realize they don't care about knowing.
Yeah, but you assume
it's
that.
like
That's an assumption. Like,
oh, it's an easy assumption. As far as
they can be very happy, and like, for example, even if their healthcare gets raised or something, they can still be very happy and don't give a shit about that. So,
no person...
I get what you mean. I really get what you mean. Like, I have the same feeling, but one thing I know is that things have to get worse before they get better. And eventually, if you hurt enough people, then it will be fixed.
I hope so. I really hope so. And I'm being paranoid. Like, I don't think that this is like a big, super serious, like, this is just a thought in my head that I'm worried about, more than I think it's like an inevitability. I'm not claiming that it's an inevitability, but I don't think that there's any person out there that's going through financial difficulties, at least, especially in America, that won't care about having their insurance raised in the future, because it's an expectation to have a certain level of, it's different than like when I choose to smoke, I'm saying that I don't care about the long-term ramifications, but the ramifications are obvious and in my face. Like, I know what the possibilities are down the future. There's no hiding that, right? We have fucking labels all over the place. In Canada, they show a fucking heart on the fucking pack.
Oh yeah, we have the same.
Yeah, like America's the only one that doesn't do that, but they still have warnings all over the place. They still have warnings all over the place. America labels them and they look all cool and shit. Yeah. But when it comes to things like buying stuff online and having companies use that data to help with your advertisements, it's not very apparent that down the line this could give them higher insurance costs, which nobody who has monetary issues wants. And it's very cruel to have that be the outcome just because, hey, you should have cared. Sorry. Like,
Right.
So that's all I'm concerned about,
But on the flip side of that, if, as far as legislation goes, having it like from the perspective of, well, the government knows what's best for you, or that's obviously a very dangerous route to go down. So even if we did have legislation to that extent, to both of your points, it's like, yeah, it does suck to be sort of ignorant about a topic like this, and yeah, all of a sudden your insurance rates increase, and oh yeah, you should have cared. But at the same time, what if the opposite happens? And not quite sure where I'm going with this, but
I get where you're going with this. The government
to say like, we knew that this was going to happen, and so we just imposed these laws preemptively, or whatever the case is, because we know it's better for you. There's also benefits to this kind of thing. Is obviously insurance rates I would not consider a benefit, but targeted advertising, plenty of people get products and things that are legitimately beneficial, and they see these through their past purchase history or whatever it is, and they might enjoy that aspect of
I'd be cool with keeping
this
all that. Yeah, like there.
data set.
I do have to say that on this part I might even be more cynical than Sly, because if it can be abused or used for something worse, that's what it will be used for. It will not be used for anything.
That's what I'm worried about.
We
yeah.
were able to split the atom. We were able to get the most given energy source out there. What we're going to do is make fucking bombs.
I love it. I love it.
200 times.
Have
I
you-
mean, so yeah, if they're going to abuse it, I'm not going to wonder that those preemptive laws should be there. Like, we are not
Yes.
going to handle that well properly as society. We're going to fuck that up, and we're going to fuck it up bad.
Cat's Cradle. There's a book by Kurt Vonnegut called Cat's Cradle that talks about this specific thing, because Kurt Vonnegut was also interested in science when he was younger and stuff, and he noticed that the scariest thing about being a scientist is that anytime you discover something, the first question the government asks is, how can we weaponize it? And so that is a very true thing that we see over time, is like anytime that you have these like technological revolutions or scientific revelations, the government will try to weaponize these things in some sort of way. Or, you know, on a lighter note, you know, companies will try to weaponize them in other ways. You know, like it's not always the government literally bombing people. It might be insurance companies raising prices to make more money, you know? So it is a scary thought. Like, I definitely think that if there is a possible consequence for bad in cases when it comes to like, especially capitalism, that bad will probably happen a lot of the time, you know, until somebody catches them, you know?
As long as you don't get health insurance just weaponizing stuff, then we might not that far off.
Yeah, right? Like, it's a scary thought. It really is. I had one more thought, but I seem to have lost it. Goody said something. Damn.
You say something interesting, Goody. This is we talk about way too much subjects at the same time.
Yeah,
and, like you're
just-
losing like track of.
Right.
Oh yeah, I want to say this too, and then you're going to back like 3/4 different
Conversations,
subjects back into the tree. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so hard to keep up with the brains sometimes. But yeah, I do think I agree that you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to this stuff. There's a lot of good that can come from these kinds of analytics. Oh, right. My other question was, if we do deem that there may be some long-term ramifications, right? Like like if the insurance company thing starts happening, or other sorry, if other problems start happening in the future when it comes to these kind of analytics, how do you figure this out when it comes to minors? Because the idea behind minors and consent and certain things like that, and them not being allowed to do certain things, is because their prefrontal cortex is not fully developed yet. What that means is that they do not have the ability to consider long-term ramifications like a fully grown person would, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. At least in the U.S., there is the COPPA Act, which is the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, which affects children 12 and under. So there is at least some of that, but you know,
how do you even find out if they're 12 and under, though, man? You know, like they could easily lie on the, you know, like that's tough to figure out.
This creates
15.
Yeah,
a really interesting paradox.
you can't drink at 13, man. Like, what the fuck?
But this is such an interesting paradox, because basically the only way you can stop it is like having legislation for it and to actually check it. And how can you check it? Like,
if their privacy is
Chinese.
Yeah,
and like the government is going to watch through your little face cam if you're a child or not. Like, who's doing this? So
yeah,
this
that's
is not
interesting.
feasible.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. Yeah, in order to protect the privacy of young people, you'd actually have to breach their privacy in a much stronger way. Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
So yeah. I don't think that stuff like that is solely with the parents, or at least the people raising the child.
Mm-hmm.
They should be responsible. Like, and I do think that this is like maybe a very leftist idea or something, but that people who are getting a new child, they should receive some kind of government advice on, like, hey, you're getting a child, how to protect his online privacy. How do parental controls work? Like, I mean, there are so much good parental controls on the current day. You can basically properly block anything, and even if your kid is able to circumvent all the protections set in place, then he should be able to and probably find a job in security. Like if you're able to do
Yeah.
that,
My kid will.
Yeah, right.
then
But
that's good.
don't forget though, we did have I don't know if it's going to be in this podcast, but we did have a conversation dealing with drugs before and about how difficult it is to have restrictions on your children because then they end up doing worse shit. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Last thing you want is, blocking pornography or something at your house, and then all of a sudden they download Tor and find a whole different world.
Whole different
that's
world, right?
substantially worse.
Yeah.
It's just
Or they're going outside your supervision, going to friends' houses and stuff to
Right.
look things up, and they're in a whole nother world now, somewhere else where you can't even watch over them. You know what I mean? There's the idea of like, as a parent, it might not be a bad idea when your kid turns 15 or 16 or so, to allow them to drink reasonably within the household, and maybe, just so that you could watch over them while they do it instead of having them sneak out of the house without you knowing and getting drunk and fucking end up in the hospital or something. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. That
Alright,
was
so-
this guy.
yeah, exactly.
honestly, privacy is really comparable with sex. So it's the same way. Like you can choose to put on a condom and have no clue of the Sorry, my English is not so good anymore.
Okay.
Like the ramifications. That's the word. Thank you. The ramifications of having sex without a condom. Like you know it, but it's your choice. You can put it on and prevent those ramifications or not. The same is with this situation. Like you teach children from probably young age, like, hey, you're probably going to have sex. I hope it for you. If you do it safe. Sex is basically privacy. Like you just need to teach people how to handle with it from a young age and how to enjoy it.
Oh, I highly agree. I mean, I actually like this comparison because, like, one of the biggest things for me and one of the reasons why I want to become an educator in the future is because I think that, and frankly, I wouldn't be able to change the world with this, but hopefully some people, in America especially, we do not educate on the correct things. Like, we teach people how to do math and science and stuff, and that's all great. I don't want to get rid of any of that. But kids got to know things like, for instance, in America, about gun safety in high school. Teach about that. You know what I mean? Drugs, but in the proper way, not just like drugs are bad, don't do them. Here's all the bad things that happen. Teach them
Oh.
what the drugs do. Teach them safe, like how they can be done safely, how they cannot be done safely. They're either gonna do them or they're not, man. You're not gonna convince them that drugs like heroin's great because you could do it safely. Like that's not gonna change their mind on it. You know what I mean? Like, and
Oh,
things of
man.
privacy. Privacy is a great thing to teach kids.
Yeah.
Like
I had an
education.
awesome health teacher that discussed drugs in a much more lax tone, and it was definitely not part of the curriculum. But he talked a lot about, about the risks.
You'll save more
and sort
lives
of-
that way. You'll save more lives that
Mhm.
way because if a kid is educated on how like what he can handle, what he can't handle, what are the signs of bad drugs, like mixed drugs, like laced or whatever, all these things, you're not going to convince. If the kid ends up doing the drugs, it's because he was going to do them anyway, 99% of the time. But you might save his life. Like he might not overdose. He might know, oh wait, like this is how this drug works with my brain. This is how these things work. I'm not going to go too overboard with this, right? Like, I wish I was more educated with drugs. I snorted the fuck out of a bunch of fentanyl once when I was younger, and before I knew what fentanyl was, I could have easily died. Like,
Right.
yeah, like
This is
'cause I
also-
was uneducated.
This is a really interesting subject because this makes me think straight of the economics class, or at least here in the Netherlands. Like we get taught economics, but not in like how do you properly do your finances, how do you do your taxes,
Those things too.
yeah, the really important things that you need, what have to do with economics that actually matter to you later in your life. No, we're getting for 80%, it's teachings about stuff that calculations I've never used ever again since I've been out of the class, unless I pursued a career in banking.
Yeah, exactly.
So-
Like, they're teaching you macroeconomics or some shit. Like you're gonna go fucking
Yeah,
trade between
Right
countries.
policies.
Yeah, like exactly.
Yeah.
Like, great policies and stuff. Like, no, fuck that.
like
dude.
teach people about stocks, or something. Like get people
Mm-hmm.
interested in stocks. Like how do they work? How does a loan work? What are the risks of a loan? Like show people the benefits, but also the downsides of things you can do and handling, responsible handling of your money. But
Credit.
we don't do any of that shit. We just teach people a lot of bullshit that they'll never learn unless it becomes their actual profession.
Yeah, and I'm fine with the general studies because you want to give people the most options possible to when they
Hmm.
find their career, they can start studying that and they're not behind, you know? So like I'm cool with teaching math and science and all this stuff. So you have a background, you know what I mean? Like if you ever find out you love math when you're in college and you didn't study geometry, you're so far behind, you know what I mean? But like when it comes to things like economics and other more specialized things, yeah, teach them life stuff. You know, like we really need to start teaching more of that. Fuck, I wish I would have known how serious credit was. I mean, I know I had people tell me, you know, but I'm a high schooler. And another thing too, I think that teachers don't treat um, teenagers like adults enough, and not in this serious kind of way. Like you're an adult, you know, you shouldn't be laughing and goofing around in class. I mean, more in like a like a one on one. Like you're a human, I'm a human. You're way smarter than what people treat you like. You know what I mean? I feel like a lot of people treat uh the students like they're dumb, like really dumb. You know what I mean? And I wish they could give them more what's the word? Yeah, I can't think of the
Let,
word.
let me let me just say that I think we found a perfect topic for one of the next podcasts.
Yeah, right.
That
Education.
yeah, for sure. And guys, if you don't mind, because I think we're almost nearing end time. Let's talk a little bit about the new group.
Okay. Yeah.
That I really like that we have this as a night entry. This podcast is something that Svaya have been talking about for quite a while, especially when we were back when we were still a crew. We really wanted to do this, and we were like, "Hey, this is the perfect time to start off with this." We're going to do this regularly. We're enjoying it. Like we already had like multiple conversations before the actual recording of this
Yeah.
podcast. And we're like, "Shit, we had to record this too because this would have been an episode on itself." And we actually had to refrain from saying stuff like, "Ah, if we already tell to going to be less natural within the podcast if we're actually going to do this." So it's so awesome to actually now be able to doing the podcast, and I've really enjoyed this first episode.
Oh, it's awesome. Yeah, I frankly, I'm afraid to talk to you guys outside of the podcast because like we have a good flow usually when we're talking, and I don't want to miss anything, you know. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
And I
and
just really want to say that we have. I really think we're going to do some unique stuff with the foundation.
yeah, definitely.
I'm very happy with the team we have.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think we're gonna do a lot of good stuff. I'm already looking into certain avenues we could take to really help with the quality of hack forums and get a lot more activity going on the forums and stuff. And we're definitely in business mode now, guys. You know, like we're kicking ass. We're getting there.
Yeah, and the awesome thing is that it seems like it's not even intentional, but we're like really interested in the subjects that might need some extra attention. Like, I mean, RCPP is active, but not as active as it might could be. And for example, you already said it today, but we're going to also do some stuff with music.
Mhm.
That's also a part that's not that active anymore. And I remember from Hack Forums the Wi-Fi gang with the raps and shit on it. That was awesome.
Yeah, yeah. It's dead now, but it used to be bumping at one point in time. The music section was pretty cool. Yeah, the SRPP is honestly, in my opinion, mostly dead. I mean, I think that half of the reason it stays alive is because of religious nuts that troll it. Um, so I would really like to get into more quality content conversations about certain things. I mean, right now there's some really good topics to be discussed, but I remember half the time I go on the SRPP, usually it's like the same God debates over and over, and you know, like we need more than
But you
that.
see,
So
you see that it's changing. That's what I really enjoy currently. Like the tone is slightly changing.
it
As in,
is.
of course, the people always collide, but that's not something related to hack forums or anything. It's normal behavior of humans. Like people tend, especially on the internet, disagree way harder with each other than if you're talking face to
Yeah.
face, for example. But it's so much better, and like there's awesome conversations going on there, and awesome content also being put out. Also by you, by the way, I'm really loving you're making there.
Thank you.
I just really think we are focusing on the right parts. Like we're doing something unique. We're doing our own, um, and I'm really looking forward to anyone who's like thinking like, hey, I love doing things like. Even if you're a marketer, like I mean, the marketplace is more probably the most booming section of the entire forum, and then the person that's interested in it, if like, hey, I'm really good at it, and I can also add to it. We're just going to focus whatever the flow brings us. This is going to be great.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my focus right now is on a lot of sections that are slower but have a lot of potential that aren't, showing their potential as much as they can be. The SRPP, I will give you, I'll grant you, is a lot better than what it has been in the past at some points. I like where the direction is going already with it, but we're gonna be there to even make it. We're gonna add our own stuff to it and really hopefully get it even better. And same with the
Yeah, that
music
is.
section, maybe Vices even. I think that section's a little bit deadish.
I have a feeling that like the amount of stoners we already have like in the group is like, yeah,
Yeah.
there's enough people out.
Yeah, there's gonna be good stuff. I mean, even kind of the lounge is a little slow sometimes at the moment.
Mm.
Like there's a lot of places where we're gonna be, uh, was it dipping our toes into? Yeah. So
We're just
I'm
gonna
ready.
dip our toes in everywhere where we can. Like,
Yep.
oh, that sounds really, really bad now I think about it. I have this one quirk where I don't sometimes really. When I write, I don't have that issue, but when I talk, especially like a free setting, I usually talk before I think about it. I keep on saying sometimes the most weird shit that people are looking at me like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah, you spend a lot of time with your foot in your mouth. It's okay. I do the same.
It's better than your tongue, you know. Well, I'm not that agile. I might try. Yeah,
Can you get it?
nah,
I don't think I could
not
reach.
really. No, no, I'm not flexible enough for.
Well, we'll do that as our one of our competitions. Put your foot in your mouth.
Put take a picture. Win 10,000 bytes if you can put your toe in your mouth. That sounds like we could just rename the group to Foot Fetish Inc. or something.
Right. The big foot as our user bar.
I might actually
Oh,
turn
man.
the crew into that. I've
There you
already
go.
was looking for a way to repurpose the crew, so we might make it a foot fetish crew. Like make it really use of our shit.
Just very esoteric. Yeah, just fucking.
Seeing this one tongue lick one of the toes, as the user bar.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. Is there anything else we need to discuss, or anything else people have on their minds right now? Does anybody else want to drop any advertisements here? Any links to anything you guys are doing? If you guys got a Twitter or something like that, I don't know if that's the thing we should be doing. Otherwise, I'll
I
just
think
cut
we
this
can
out.
only say like keep an eye on the lounge for the hack games we're putting up every Friday. Uh, so we did it last
Oh.
Friday yesterday, and we kind of forgot like the timing stuff. So I'm Dutch, and our time zone's a little bit different. And like, oh wait, probably like 80% of the people on the forum are currently asleep. So next week will be better. So the upcoming Friday we'll properly time it and have it so people can actually see it.
Yes, guys, don't be allergic to bites. All right, we're gonna be doing a lot of competitions and stuff and fun forum games on Fridays. So get ready for that for sure. I think actually I'm gonna be working on even getting a little bit of the strategy section of hack forums also. I might start working on. I want to do some beginner chess lessons and tutorials and stuff, and maybe get into some other strategy games that I used to love when I was younger.
Oh wait, goodies! You can do shit on a roller coaster tycoon too.
Oh yeah, yeah, there you go. The roller coaster meta.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
I
I'm going,
just-
I'm going to remember that.
Yeah. I've been playing Overwatch for about a year now. My girlfriend got me so into it. She's very into it. She's got tattoos of some of the characters
Oh,
and
shit.
their logos and stuff, and she loves it. She's been playing it for a long time now, several years. So I got it for PC. She plays on a PS4, and just like a couple months after we started dating, they introduced crossplay, so now we can play with each other.
Hey.
And so that's been fun. But that's pretty much the only game. I just got Warzone yesterday, and I'm years late to the party.
You under a rock? Yeah.
Yeah, I know, but I'm having fun with it.
I
Hell
can
yeah.
already like imagine like Goodies and his girlfriend like in the bedroom, and he's like in one of those cosplay Overwatch customs, like, hey.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I used to play some Overwatch. Maybe we could get into a little bit of Overwatch. I touched Plat a couple
Oh,
times,
man.
but I haven't played it in a long time now. I probably suck.
Oh man, we should do a round of Abram again. All right, yeah.
Yeah, League
but
Two.
let's finish
Yeah.
up, I think.
Okay, yeah. All right, I'm gonna stop the recording. So thank you guys for watching. If you're interested in more, please comment below on anything that you liked, conversations you want to have. If you really just liked it, and we will be
Isn't it
back next
technically
time.
listening? Isn't it technically listening too?
Listening,
Like for
watched.
the people who aren't watching, they're listening.
Yeah, it's very, it's very. Yeah, I'm being very blind phobic at the moment. I'm so sorry. Yeah, for people who are listening, watching, anything like that. Yeah, and we will catch you guys later. Peace.